side, I'm a mean go-getter. Chasing pretty women, that make me feel better.
Old cars had style. The body styles, they worried more about the style of the car and the accents of the car than fuel efficiency. So all the old cars don't look like an egg. You know, they're not all rounded and smooth, only when they needed to be for artistic reasons. The car designers back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they were more artists than engineers, you know, and they designed their body shapes with a different set of rules than people do nowadays, which may not necessarily be better, but it looks nicer.
I'm like a werewolf howling in the moonlight. Lift up the dress and give me a bite.
Older cars are a lot bigger and a lot more solid. They're easier to restore because you got more metal to work with. So on a 59 Chevy, they didn't really engineer for longevity, right? They didn't engineer the car to last that long, and the problem was that the inner fender well doesn't reach all the way over to the fender on the front. So what happens is the water splashes off the tire onto the back of where the headlights are, all along the front of the grille and everything like that, and it completely rots them out. You can't really restore a new car because a lot of it's plastic and the electronics are just out of hand. The electronics in the old cars, there barely was any. I mean, you had some lights and that was about it. They're real easy to work on. There's a lot of space in the engine compartment. You can pretty much crawl in there. You don't have to wedge your arm in along a bunch of other equipment. You've got plenty of room. I mean, you've got yards of space to work on stuff. So it makes them a lot easier to work on. Changing spark plugs is nothing on an old, like on my 62 Impala. I could do it with one hand and drink a beer with one hand and change spark plugs with the other.
I got a hot rod Ford with a big V8. When she flies down the road, she don't hesitate. Well, you say you want to race, I think you're gonna win. Tell you what, son, you better think again, 'cause she's my hot rod Ford and she always treats me good.
Back in the 50s and 60s, it was about comfort, size. You have a lot of space in the inside of the car. The seats were more plush. They weren't real firm. They were nice and cushy. You had a lot of leg room. Just like the 50 Merc, you can chop these. You can already see marks that we've made drawn out. So where we're going to chop this, where we're going to make the cuts to cut about we're going to cut 4 inches out of the back end and 3 inches out of the front end, right here and here, to lower the whole roof down to get it, a sleeker kind of a cooler look. Once we get the floor welded in and it's structurally sound, that's when we'll take and we'll tack weld pieces diagonally and crisscross to give it more stability. So when we cut off the top, it doesn't freak out and twist and warp, so we can get a good solid clean chop to get it nice and level. But you can't really chop the top until you get a solid floor, because if we chop the top, there's nothing holding this car together at all. The body will just fall, The same people that came back from World War II brought back a bunch of new experiences. Aircraft mechanics in the war come back, wanted to take the knowledge that they gained and do something with it. They were sitting around going stir crazy. And so these guys came back from the war, bought up all these Model A's, were using them to get around, using their mechanical skills that they learned during the war. But being in a war, they were used to extreme things. So they, getting blown up and shot at all day long, they got this adrenaline rush, whether they liked it or not. It's probably a bad thing. The adrenaline rush that they were getting for years in war, they didn't have anymore. Well, boys being boys, that turned into drag racing, turned into hot rodding cars, turned into racing at the salt flats. That culture sort of blossomed in the early mid-50s. At the same time, rockabilly, rhythm and blues, doo-wop, all that stuff started coming around. The younger kids in the 50s learning all these little tricks and seeing all these hot rods coming around, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids started building hot rods of their own. Their older brothers come back from the war, builds a hot rod, they grow up 5 years later, they get the hot rod from their uncle, they rebuild it, and they're driving around all over hell in the 50s with these hot rods. And being young kids, they were all into the music at the same time. Having a hot rod and listening to rockabilly music is the same thing as getting tattoos and having a mohawk and being a punk rocker in the mid 90s. You know, it's like a thing that kids are going to do. Yeah, on 59s the front end parts are hard to get. Here's the other side. It's all rusted out here. We've got to cut this whole section. All of this here all needs to be cut out, and we need to bend new pieces and weld them all in and smooth it all out to get this to be back to square steel, the regular steel that'll work.
Well, she's my hot rod Ford. Well, she's my hot rod Ford, and she always treats me good. Let's rock.
With the traditional 50s rods and all the different clubs, it's about the cool things that you made, you know.
If you're gonna play it smart, then I think you better step aside. I'm a mean go-getter.